Welcome to Wisdom Comes from the Lord, from Divine Providence by Emanuel Swedenborg, Vegetarian, Part 2 of 2, on Words of Wisdom. In the 18th century, a great Swedish scientist and inventor, at the height of his career, began to see visions of heaven, spirits, saints, and angels. He saw Lord Jesus, vegetarian, come to open his inner eye, which allowed him to travel in the celestial sphere and talk with different spiritual beings. This mystical experience transformed the scientist into an enlightened spiritual leader with a new understanding of Christianity. His name is Emanuel Swedenborg, vegetarian. From 1744 onwards, Emanuel Swedenborg spent over a decade of his life writing down what he saw in his spiritual voyages in more than 24 books. His visions of heaven and the afterlife, his realization that God is love, and his discovery of the Holy Bible's deeper meanings are just some of the revolutionary topics he bravely documented. The life and works of this remarkable spiritual world explorer inspire people to this day. Let us continue with selections from Divine Providence, where Emanuel Swedenborg, vegetarian, expounds on how our wisdom comes from the Lord and how we become happier when we are closer to the Lord. The Lord's divine providence has for its object a heaven from the human race. The more closely one is conjoined to the Lord, the happier one becomes. No one who is in the pleasures of the lusts of evil can know anything of the joys of the affections of good, in which the angelic heaven is. These pleasures and joys are opposite in internals, and hence inwardly in externals, though superficially they may differ little. Every love has its enjoyments. The love of evil with those in lusts also has, such as the love of committing adultery, of taking revenge, of defrauding, of stealing, of acting cruelly, indeed in the worst people, of blaspheming the holy things of the church, and of inveighing against God. They come of lusts which obsess the interiors of the mind. From these flow into the body and excite uncleannesses there which arouse the fibers. The physical pleasure springs from the pleasure which the mind takes in lusts. After death, everyone comes to know in the spiritual world what the uncleannesses are which arouse the body's fibers in such persons, and comes to know the nature of them. In general, they are things cadaverous, excrementitious, filthy, malodorous, and urinous, for their hells teem with such uncleannesses. After one has entered hell, however, these filthy delights are turned into wretchedness. This has been told in order that it may be understood what heaven's felicity is and its nature, of which we are now to speak. For a thing is known from its opposite. It is impossible to describe in words the blessedness, satisfaction, joy, and pleasure, in short, the felicity of heaven, so sensibly perceived there. What is perceived solely by feeling cannot be described, for it does not fall into ideas of thought nor, therefore, into words. For the understanding sees only and sees what is of wisdom or truth, but not what is of love or good. Those felicities are therefore inexpressible, but still they ascend in like degree with wisdom. They are infinitely various, and each is ineffable. I have heard this, also perceived it. These felicities enter when a person, of themselves and yet from the Lord, casts out the lusts of the love of evil and falsity. For these felicities are the happinesses of the affections of good and truth, the opposites of the lusts of the love of evil and falsity. Those happinesses begin from the Lord, thus from the inmost. diffuse themselves thence into things lower even to lowermost things, and thus fill the angel, making him a body of delight. Such happinesses are to be found in infinite variety in every affection of good and truth, and eminently in the affection of wisdom. There is no comparing the joys of the lusts of evil and the joys of the affections of good. Inwardly in the former is the devil, in the latter the Lord. For corresponding uncleannesses affect the evil, and corresponding cleannesses the good. Plainly, then, the more closely one is conjoined with the Lord, the happier one is. This happiness rarely shows itself in the world, however, for people are then in a natural state, and the natural does not communicate with the spiritual by continuity, but by correspondence. The communication is felt only in a certain repose and peace of mind, especially after struggles against evil. But when a person puts off the natural state and enters the spiritual state, as they do on leaving the world, the happiness described above gradually manifests itself. The more closely one is conjoined to the Lord, the more distinctly do they seem to themselves to be their own, and the more plainly do they recognize that they are the Lord's. There is infernal freedom, and there is heavenly freedom. Thinking and willing evil, and also speaking and doing it, so far as civil and moral laws do not prevent, is from infernal freedom. But thinking and willing good and speaking and doing it, so far as opportunity offers, is from heavenly freedom. A person perceives as their own what they think, will, speak and do in freedom. The freedom anyone has always comes from their love. The person in an evil love cannot but deem infernal freedom to be real freedom, and a person in love of the good perceives that heavenly freedom is real freedom. Furthermore, it cannot be denied that to be led by good is freedom, and to be led by evil is bondage. For to be led by good is to be led by the Lord, but to be led by evil is to be led by the devil. Inasmuch as all they do in freedom appears to a person to be their own, coming as it does from what they love, and to act from one's love, as was said, is to act freely, it follows that conjunction with the Lord causes a person to seem free and also their own, and the more closely they are conjoined to the Lord, to seem so much freer and so much more their own. They seem the more distinctly their own, because it is the nature of the divine love to want its own to be another's, that is, to be the angels or the persons. All spiritual love is such, preeminently the Lord's. The Lord, moreover, never coerces anyone, for nothing to which one is coerced seems one's own, and what seems not one's own cannot be done from one's love, or be appropriated to one as one's own. People are always led in freedom by the Lord, therefore, and reformed and regenerated in freedom. For more information, please visit sacred-texts.com.